Chapter 1. The Royal Refusal. The Zyrenian Palace was an architectural marvel, carved into the heart of a crystalline mountain that sparkled like a beacon under the light of its planet's 3 suns. Its vast halls were filled with light that refracted off translucent walls, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that danced with the shifting rhythms of Zyrenian music. The air buzzed with an energy that only heightened the tension in the room. For today was no ordinary day. It was the mating tribunal, a ritual that marked the rare occasion when Princess Zyra Viral, heir to the Zyrenian throne, would consider choosing a mate. The suitors, aliens of every species, stature, and renown, had traveled across galaxies to stand in the radiant presence of the princess. Each one brought unique gifts, weapons forged from collapsing stars, gems mined from the hearts of supernovae, and elaborate promises of alliances and power. They stood nervously, shifting under the intense scrutiny of the royal court and the imposing figure of King Viral, whose emerald skin glowed faintly with disapproval at his daughter's aloofness. Atop the dais, Princess Zyra sat with an elegance that bordered on defiance. Her silvery skin shimmered, and her iridescent hair cascaded like liquid starlight over her shoulders. Her deep, violet eyes scanned the room, not with interest, but with boredom. For years, she had rejected every suitor who dared approach her, and today was no exception. The first suitor, a towering warrior from the Dreckner clans, stepped forward. His armor gleamed, and his voice boomed with confidence. "Princess Zyra, I offer you the strength of my people and the protection of the Dreckner fleet. Together, we shall conquer any enemy." Zyra raised a delicate hand, silencing him mid-sentence. "Your strength is admirable, Dreckner, but it does not move me. I have no need for conquest." The warrior's face fell, and he stepped back, his pride wounded. The court murmured among themselves, but no one dared challenge the princess. One by one, the suitors approached, and one by one, they were dismissed with icy precision. Finally, after the last suitor retreated, King Viral rose from his throne, his emerald robes flowing like molten metal. "Zyra," he said, his voice heavy with authority, "this cannot continue. You must choose a mate. The future of our people depends on it." Zyra stood, her iridescent gown catching the light and reflecting it like a prism. "I will not choose a mate simply because it is expected, father. None here are worthy." The king's expression darkened, but before he could respond, a quiet voice broke the tension. "Perhaps, your majesty, the princess seeks something different." The court turned to the speaker, a human standing near the edge of the hall. He was unassuming by Zyrenian standards, average in height, his features rugged but plain. His name was Ethan Cole, and he was an envoy from the United Earth Federation, sent to negotiate trade agreements. He had no place in the mating tribunal, but his boldness had silenced the room. Zyra's eyes locked onto Ethan, her curiosity piqued for the first time that day. "And what do you mean by something different, Earthling?" Ethan stepped forward, his boots clicking against the crystalline floor. "With respect, princess, perhaps your suitors have failed because they focused on what they can offer you, instead of understanding who you are." The court gasped at his audacity, but Zyra smiled faintly. "And you believe you understand me, human?" Ethan met her gaze without flinching. "I don't presume to, your highness. But maybe that's where we should start." An unlikely intrigue. The court buzzed with whispers as the tribunal was abruptly adjourned. Zyra, intrigued by the human's defiance, ordered Ethan to remain as a guest in the palace. Over the next few days, rumors spread like wildfire. Why had the princess shown interest in a human, of all beings? And what did it mean for the galaxy's most eligible bachelorette? Ethan found himself both a curiosity and an outcast among the palace staff and guests. Zyrenians viewed humans as inferior, fragile, and unremarkable in both appearance and ability. Yet Ethan carried himself with quiet confidence, ignoring the stares and whispers as he explored the palace. Zyra, meanwhile, was fascinated by the human. She observed him from afar, noting the way he interacted with her people. He was kind but firm, respectful but unyielding. He spoke little of himself, yet his actions spoke volumes. One evening, as Ethan stood on a balcony overlooking the glowing forests of Zyran Prime, Zyra approached him. "You've caused quite a stir, Earthling," she said, her voice carrying a mix of amusement and curiosity. Ethan turned, surprised to see her so unguarded. "It wasn't my intention, Your Highness." She stepped closer, the light of the twin moons illuminating her features. "You spoke boldly at the tribunal. Most would not dare." "I wasn't trying to offend," Ethan said, "but it seemed like no one was willing to tell you the truth." "And what truth is that?" she asked, tilting her head. "That maybe you're not looking for a mate who can give you something," Ethan replied. "Maybe you're looking for someone who can challenge you." Zyra's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time in years, she felt something she couldn't quite name. "And do you think you could challenge me, human?" Ethan smiled faintly. "I think I already have." A growing connection. Over the weeks that followed, Zyra found herself drawn to Ethan in ways she didn't fully understand. They spent hours talking about their worlds, their cultures, and their dreams. Ethan's perspective was refreshingly different from anything she had encountered before. He didn't worship her as others did, nor did he try to impress her. He simply treated her as an equal, and that was something she had never experienced. Ethan, in turn, found Zyra to be far more complex than he had imagined. Beneath her icy exterior was a fierce intellect and a deep sense of responsibility for her people. She carried the weight of the Zyrenian legacy on her shoulders, yet she longed for a life beyond the confines of the palace. Their connection didn't go unnoticed. The court whispered of scandal, and Zyra's suitors grew resentful. The idea of a human winning the favor of the princess was unthinkable to many, but Zyra paid them no mind. For the first time in her life, she was beginning to understand what she truly wanted. The court's disapproval. The tipping point came during a formal banquet. One of Zyra's former suitors, a Zyrenian noble named Lorik, confronted Ethan in front of the entire court. "You don't belong here, Earthling," Lorik sneered, his glowing emerald eyes narrowing. "The princess deserves a mate of stature, not a fragile outsider." Ethan remained calm, his voice steady. "Respectfully, Lorik, that's for the princess to decide." Lorik's face twisted with anger. "You dare presume to challenge me?" Zyra, seated at the head of the table, stood abruptly. "Enough, Lorik. You embarrass yourself." The court fell silent as Zyra walked to Ethan's side, her gaze unwavering. "Ethan may not be of Zyrenian blood, but he has shown more courage and integrity than any of you." Lorik's jaw dropped, and the court erupted in whispers. Zyra's declaration was unprecedented, but it was also undeniable. The princess's plea. Later that night, Zyra found Ethan in the gardens, sitting beneath a glowing crystal tree. She hesitated for a moment before approaching him. "Ethan," she said softly, "I've spent my entire life rejecting what others wanted for me. But now, I'm afraid." Ethan looked up at her, his expression gentle. "Afraid of what?" "Afraid of what it means to want something for myself," she admitted. "Afraid of what it means to want you." Ethan stood, taking her hands in his. "Zyra, you don't have to be afraid. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Tears glistened in her violet eyes as she smiled. "Then stay with me. Be my mate not because it's expected, but because I choose you." Ethan's heart swelled as he met her gaze. "I'll stay, Zyra, for as long as you'll have me." And as the twin moons rose over the palace, the princess who had rejected all others found herself pleading for the one who had shown her what it meant to be truly seen. Chapter 2. The Court's Rebellion. The sunrises on Zyren Prime were a spectacle of light and color, the planet's 3 suns painting the sky in hues of gold and violet. But within the radiant halls of the Zyrenian palace, the mood was far from harmonious. News of Princess Zyra's declaration had spread like wildfire, and the court was in an uproar. The prospect of a human being chosen as the royal consort was not only unprecedented but, to many, outright scandalous. Ethan had become the center of attention, both admiration and disdain. While some saw his bravery as a refreshing change, others viewed him as an interloper who had no place among the Zyrenian elite. Zyra, however, stood firm in her decision, even as dissent brewed among the nobility. A dangerous proposition. The tension came to a head during a private council meeting called by King Viral. The room was filled with the most influential members of the Zyrenian court, their glowing skin reflecting the light from the crystalline walls. Ethan stood at Zyra's side, his posture confident but inwardly bracing for the backlash. "You've disrupted the balance of this court," said Lorik, his voice cold and measured. The noble's emerald eyes glared at Ethan with barely concealed contempt. The princess's actions are reckless, and this human is a threat to our traditions. Zyra stepped forward, her tone sharp. I will not stand for your disrespect, Lorik. Ethan has proven himself more honorable than any of you. Honor does not grant him the right to rule alongside you, Lorik shot back, his glowing patterns darkening in anger. The court must intervene before this disgrace destroys us. King Viral raised a hand, silencing the room. His expression was unreadable as he turned to Ethan. Earthling, you've captured my daughter's favor. But what makes you believe you are worthy of her? Ethan met the king's gaze steadily. With respect, your majesty, worth isn't about birthright or wealth. It's about actions. I care about Zyra, and I'll stand by her no matter what. The king's eyes narrowed. Bold words. But words alone will not sway the court. Before Ethan could respond, Lorik stepped forward. Then let him prove it, he said, a sly smile spreading across his face. By tradition, any suitor who wishes to claim the princess's hand must face the trial of worth. A murmur rippled through the room. The trial of worth was an ancient rite, rarely invoked, that tested a suitor's strength, intelligence, and resolve. Many had failed, and those who succeeded often emerged scarred. Zyra's expression darkened. This is absurd. The trial hasn't been used in generations. Because no one dared challenge tradition as you have, Lorik replied smugly. Let the human face the trial. If he succeeds, he'll have the court's blessing. If not, he left the rest unsaid, but the implication was clear. King Viral looked to Zyra, then to Ethan. Do you accept this challenge, Earthling? Ethan glanced at Zyra, her worry evident despite her composed exterior. He nodded, his voice firm. I accept. The first trial, strength. The trial of worth began the following day in the palace's arena of light, a massive structure carved into the mountain's heart. Thousands of Zyrenians gathered to witness the spectacle, their glowing patterns creating a sea of light in the stands. The first challenge was a test of strength. Ethan was pitted against a Karnak beast, a towering creature with razor-sharp claws and armor-like scales. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, many expecting the human to fail spectacularly. As the beast charged, Ethan relied on his agility, dodging its attacks and using the terrain to his advantage. He lured the creature into a trap, using its own momentum to force it into a crystalline pillar that shattered on impact. With a precise strike from a borrowed energy blade, he brought the beast down, earning the crowd's reluctant applause. The second trial, intelligence. The second challenge was a test of intelligence, conducted in the Chamber of Illusions. Ethan faced a series of holographic puzzles that required not only logic, but an understanding of Zyrenian culture and history. Zyra had secretly prepared him for this, sharing stories and insights during their late-night conversations. Despite the court's skepticism, Ethan navigated the challenges with a mix of quick thinking and intuition. He completed the trial with seconds to spare, the holographic maze dissolving into light as the judges nodded in approval. The final trial, resolve. The final trial was the most daunting test of resolve. Ethan was placed in the sphere of shadows, a psychic chamber designed to confront participants with their deepest fears. Few had ever emerged unscathed. As the chamber activated, Ethan found himself in a simulation of his past. He was back on Earth, reliving a mission gone wrong during his time as a diplomat. He saw the faces of those he couldn't save, the weight of his failures threatening to crush him. But then he heard Zyra's voice, faint but steady. You are stronger than this, Ethan. Come back to me. The vision began to fade, and Ethan focused on her words. He pushed through the illusion, emerging from the chamber with a renewed sense of purpose. The crowd erupted in cheers, and even King Viral looked impressed. A court divided. Despite Ethan's success, not everyone was convinced. Lorik and his allies continued to scheme, determined to undermine the human's place in the court. But Zyra's faith in Ethan never wavered. You've proven yourself in ways no one expected, she told him that evening, her violet eyes shining with pride. The court may resist, but they cannot deny what they've seen. Ethan smiled, his hand brushing against hers. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. A new threat. Just as the court began to settle, a new threat emerged. A neighboring faction, angered by the disruption in Zyrenian politics, declared war on the kingdom. Their fleet loomed on the horizon, demanding Zyra's surrender in exchange for peace. Ethan stood by Zyra's side as the court debated their response. "We can't let them dictate our future," he said. "We stand together, or we fall together." Zyra nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then we fight." As the palace prepared for battle, Ethan and Zyra's bond grew stronger. Together, they would prove that love, courage, and unity could overcome even the greatest challenges. Chapter 3. Love Amid the War. The announcement of war spread through the Zyrenian palace like wildfire, shattering any illusions of peace. The grand halls, once filled with crystalline light and serene melodies, now buzzed with activity as soldiers, advisors, and engineers scrambled to prepare. Princess Zyra stood at the center of the chaos, her radiant form commanding the attention of all as she issued orders with unwavering authority. Ethan was at her side, his human practicality and years of tactical experience making him an unlikely but invaluable ally in the coming conflict. The tension in the air was palpable, but Ethan and Zyra shared a quiet determination that bound them together more tightly than ever. The threat at hand. The invaders were the KRYLL Dominion, a militaristic faction known for their ruthlessness and advanced technology. Their fleet of warships had already entered Zyrenian space, and their ultimatum was clear: surrender Princess Zyra or face annihilation. The court, still divided over Zyra's relationship with Ethan, was thrown into further disarray. Many of the nobles argued for negotiation or even capitulation, fearing the destruction of their civilization. Others, including Zyra herself, refused to bow to such demands. "They want to tear us apart from within," Zyra said during a war council meeting. "But if we stand united, we can show them the strength of Zyrenia." Ethan studied the holographic display of the KRYLL fleet, his brow furrowed. "Their ships outnumber ours 2-1, and their firepower is unmatched. If we're going to win, we'll need more than brute force." Lorik, who had reluctantly supported Zyra after Ethan's triumph in the Trial of Worth, scoffed. "And what would the humans suggest? Diplomacy?" Ethan met Lorik's glare calmly. "No, I suggest we fight smart. Use the terrain of this system to our advantage. The crystal fields surrounding Zyran Prime can scatter their sensors and disrupt their targeting systems." Zyra nodded, her trust in Ethan unwavering. "Ethan's right. We use the fields to even the odds. Our fleet will lie in wait and strike when the KRYLL least expect it." Preparing for battle. The next few days were a blur of activity as the Zyrenian fleet mobilized. Ethan worked closely with Zyra and her military advisors, his human perspective offering new strategies that the Zyrenians hadn't considered. Despite the skepticism of some officers, his plans quickly gained traction as the fleet began to adapt. Meanwhile, Zyra took time to rally her people. She addressed the citizens of Zyran Prime through a holographic broadcast, her voice steady and resolute. "This is a moment that will define us," she declared. "We face an enemy who seeks to divide us, to destroy what we hold dear. But together, we are stronger than any foe. Together, we will prevail." Ethan watched the broadcast from a nearby console, his chest swelling with admiration. Zyra's courage was magnetic, and he knew he would follow her to the ends of the galaxy. A quiet moment. The night before the battle, Ethan found Zyra in the palace gardens, her glowing patterns soft and muted under the starlit sky. She stood by a crystalline fountain, her expression distant as she gazed at the reflection of the twin moons. "Couldn't sleep?" Ethan asked, stepping beside her. She shook her head. "There's too much at stake. My people, my home, and now you. I can't lose any of it." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You won't. We've got a solid plan, and you've got an entire fleet ready to fight for you." Zyra turned to him, her violet eyes shimmering with emotion. "You've given me more than strategies, Ethan. You've given me hope." He smiled, his hand moving to cup her cheek. "And you've given me a reason to fight." For a moment, the weight of the impending battle melted away as their lips met in a gentle, lingering kiss. It was a promise, unspoken but deeply felt, a vow to face whatever came next together. The battle begins. The following day, the Zyrenian fleet took up their positions within the crystal fields. The massive structures, naturally formed from the planet's unique geology, created a labyrinth of glowing spires that distorted light and interfered with electronic systems. Ethan stood on the bridge of the Viral's Honor, the Zyrenian flagship, alongside Zyra and her top officers. The tension was thick as the KRYLL fleet approached, their ships cutting through the void like predators. "Hold your positions," Zyra commanded, her voice calm but firm. "Wait for my signal." The KRYLL ships slowed as they entered the fields, their formations breaking apart as their sensors faltered. Confusion rippled through their fleet, and Zyra seized the moment. "Now," she ordered. The Zyrenian fleet erupted from their hiding places, their crystalline ships firing beams of concentrated energy that pierced through the KRYLL vessels like lances of light. The battle was chaotic, with ships weaving through the crystal formations in a deadly dance. Ethan coordinated with the fleet's commanders, relaying adjustments to their strategy as the fight evolved. His quick thinking and ability to adapt kept the Zyrenians one step ahead, but the KRYLL were relentless. A critical moment. As the battle raged on, the KRYLL flagship, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons, targeted the Viral's Honor. Its powerful cannons unleashed a barrage that shook the Zyrenian ship, alarms blaring as systems failed. "We can't take another hit like that," the chief engineer warned. Ethan's mind raced. "We need to disable that dreadnought, or we're done." Zyra nodded, her glowing patterns bright with determination. "Then we take the fight to them." Before Ethan could protest, Zyra ordered a boarding party to be prepared. She turned to him, her expression resolute. "I need you with me, Ethan." Together, they led a small team onto the KRYLL flagship, using a cloaked shuttle to evade its defenses. The interior of the ship was a labyrinth of dark corridors and heavily armed guards, but Zyra's combat prowess and Ethan's tactical skills saw them through. They reached the dreadnought's core, a massive reactor pulsing with energy. As Zyra worked to overload the system, Ethan held off the approaching guards, his plasma rifle blazing. "Hurry, Zyra!" he shouted as the enemy closed in. "Almost there," she replied, her hands flying over the controls. With a final command, the reactor began to destabilize, alarms echoing through the ship. Zyra grabbed Ethan's hand, pulling him toward their escape route. The shuttle launched just as the KRYLL flagship exploded in a blinding flash, taking much of their fleet with it. The remaining KRYLL ships, leaderless and disoriented, retreated. Victory and vindication. Back on Zyren Prime, the victory was celebrated as a turning point in the planet's history. The court, once divided, now united in their admiration for Zyra and Ethan. Even Lorik, though begrudgingly, acknowledged the humans' role in their survival. As the celebrations continued, Zyra and Ethan stood together on the palace balcony, looking out over their people. "You've proven yourself in every way," Zyra said, her voice filled with emotion. "Not just to my court, but to me." Ethan took her hand, his gaze steady. "And you've shown me what it means to truly belong." Their bond, forged in the fires of war, was unbreakable. Together, they would lead Zyrenia into a new era, one where love, courage, and unity transcended the boundaries of race and tradition. Chapter 4. A New Era. The victory over the KRYLL Dominion was more than a military triumph. It was a pivotal moment for the Zyrenian people. For the first time in centuries, their isolated, tradition-bound culture faced a profound shift. Princess Zyra's bold leadership, alongside the unexpected contribution of a human, had sparked a new conversation about unity, adaptability, and what it truly meant to be strong. But not everyone was ready for change. Aftermath of war. The grand halls of the Zyrenian palace were alive with celebration. Crystalline banners shimmered in the breeze, and the iridescent glow of Zyrenian patterns lit the massive courtyard. Citizens filled the space, their cheers echoing as Princess Zyra and Ethan stood side by side on the royal dais. The sight of them together, Zyra in her radiant gown, Ethan in a simple yet dignified ceremonial suit, was a symbol of a new beginning. Zyra raised her hand, silencing the crowd. Her voice, amplified by the palace's acoustic architecture, carried over the gathered masses. "Today, we celebrate not only our victory but our unity. We face the KRYLL not as individuals or factions, but as one people, standing together against a common enemy." The crowd roared its approval, but as Zyra continued, Her tone grew serious. This victory was not without cost. Lives were lost, and scars remain. We honor those who sacrificed for our survival, and we vow to build a future worthy of their memory. Ethan stepped forward, a wave of murmurs rippling through the crowd. Humans were still a curiosity on Zyron Prime, but Ethan's actions had earned him respect. I came here as an outsider, he began, his voice steady. I didn't expect to find acceptance, much less a place to belong. But what I've learned is that strength isn't just about power or tradition, it's about the willingness to adapt, to grow, and to stand by those you care about. Zyra smiled at him, her violet eyes glowing with pride. Together, they had not only won a war but planted the seeds of a new era. The Council's resistance. Not everyone celebrated the changes Ethan represented. The Zyrenian High Council, a body of elders who guarded the planet's ancient traditions, had convened in secret after the celebrations. Their meeting chamber, deep within the palace, was dimly lit by glowing crystals, their shadows flickering like specters on the walls. Lorik, still nursing the wounds of his bruised pride, stood at the center of the room. The princess's actions have endangered our traditions. Her alliance with a human undermines the very foundation of our culture. Elder Myril, a soft-spoken but influential council member, tilted her head. And yet, without this human, we would not be standing here today. Are traditions worth preserving at the cost of our survival? Lorik scowled. Survival is not the issue. The issue is what comes next. What if this sets a precedent? Will we open our borders to outsiders? Allow them to dilute what makes us Zyrenian? The council murmured in agreement and dissent. The room split between those clinging to the past and those willing to embrace the future. Myril raised her hand, quieting the room. We cannot ignore what has happened, nor can we dismiss the princess's actions outright. But we must tread carefully. Change must be guided, not forced. The council agreed to observe for now, their decision a temporary reprieve in an ongoing conflict of ideologies. The burden of leadership. Zyra was no stranger to the weight of leadership, but in the weeks following the victory, that weight grew heavier. Rebuilding efforts were underway, with Ethan taking an active role in organizing relief for the areas hardest hit by the KRYLL attack. His practicality and willingness to get his hands dirty endeared him to many of the common citizens, even as the nobility remained divided. One evening, as Zyra reviewed reports in her private chamber, Ethan entered quietly. "You've been at this for hours," he said, placing a steaming cup of Zyrenian herbal tea on the desk. "You need a break." Zyra sighed, setting the reports aside. "There's too much to do. The council's resistance is growing, and I can't ignore it." Ethan pulled up a chair, his expression thoughtful. "You don't have to face it alone. Let me help." "You've already done so much," Zyra replied, her voice soft. "I can't ask more of you." "You're not asking," Ethan said with a faint smile. "I'm offering. We're in this together, remember?" Zyra reached for his hand, her touch warm and grounding. "Together," she echoed, her voice carrying both gratitude and affection. A plot revealed. Their unity was tested when Lorik's schemes came to light. Unable to sway the council, he had secretly aligned himself with remnants of the KRYLL Dominion, hoping to undermine Zyra's rule and cast doubt on her alliance with Ethan. The plot was uncovered when a KRYLL operative, captured during a raid, confessed to working with Lorik. The revelation sent shockwaves through the court, and Zyra wasted no time confronting the traitor. In the throne room, with the court gathered, Zyra's voice rang out like a blade. "Lorik am Zyra, you stand accused of treason. Do you deny it?" Lorik's glowing patterns dimmed with fear, but he managed to sneer. "I acted in the interest of our people. You have betrayed our traditions, and I sought to correct that." Ethan, standing beside Zyra, stepped forward. "You didn't act for your people. You acted for yourself." The court murmured, and Zyra silenced them with a raised hand. "Lorik, your actions have endangered not only our people, but the very foundation of our trust. You will answer for your crimes." The former noble was stripped of his title and exiled, a punishment that sent a clear message to the court. Change was coming, and it would not be stopped. A hopeful future. With Lorik's betrayal behind them, Zyra and Ethan focused on uniting their people. They worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between tradition and progress, introducing reforms that honored Zyrenian culture while embracing the benefits of collaboration with other species. Their bond, forged in the fires of war, grew stronger with each passing day. Ethan became a trusted advisor and partner to Zyra, his insights and humanity bringing a new perspective to Zyrenia's leadership. One evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the glowing forests of Zyren Prime, Zyra turned to Ethan, her violet eyes luminous. "You've changed everything," she said softly. "For me, for my people." Ethan smiled, his hand finding hers. "You've changed me too. For the better." They shared a quiet moment, the weight of their responsibilities momentarily lifted as they gazed at the stars. Epilogue: The Legacy of Love. Years later, the story of Princess Zyra and the human who won her heart would become a legend on Zyren Prime. Their partnership not only secured the future of their people, but also laid the foundation for a new era of intergalactic cooperation. As their children bearing the luminous patterns of their mother and the determined spirit of their father played in the palace gardens, Zyra and Ethan watched with pride. They had faced every challenge together, and now they stood as a beacon of hope for a galaxy that desperately needed it. And so, the princess who had once rejected all suitors found her destiny in the unlikeliest of places, not in power or tradition, but in the courage to embrace the unknown and the love that changed everything.